asistentes están en modo de solo escucha.
Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to our 7th webinar and last webinar in the series of requirements engineering, in this case about specifically about requirements management and about changes and version control for requirements. My name is Jose Muñoz and I am currently working as a consultant in Visure Requirements. In the past years, I have been gathering experience in different projects as a system analyst, assistant engineer, business analyst, and also conducting some trainings about the requirement. In the following webinar, we'll be sharing those experience and good practices when working with requirement. Today, as the 7th webinar and also last webinar in the series, we will be recapping the main concepts that we have already learned in the previous webinars about requirements engineering, different activities that compound requirements engineering, the different tasks that we have seen inside requirements management, and finally we will be moving forward into the webinar main topic, which is going to be the change management and the version control of the requirements. When I say change management, understand that it's always around requirements. Okay, it should be requirements change management, of course. Before starting, please allow me to explain a bit about the GoToWebinar interface. As you may have noticed already, all of you are mute in the GoToWebinar. But you can use the question tab located in the GoToWebinar tab in the right part of your screen by default at any given moment during the webinar in order to post any question that you may have. At the end of the webinar, we will have some time for question and answer, and I will be answering the question that you may post during the webinar or at the end of the webinar. Additionally, we are recording this webinar and we will be uploading it to our YouTube channel and other internet media channels, so you can reproduce this video afterward. If you haven't been in the previous 6 webinars on the series, I strongly recommend you to have a look at them, as we are as in those videos we have been covering all the activities into the requirements engineering process. And finally, before starting, as I used to do in this webinar, just allow me to explain a bit about the title, because you may have noticed that in the title it says Requirements Engineering Series, while in the invitation says Requirements Management Series. Well, we have used requirements management for the invitation because probably it's a more popular concept. But in fact, what we are discussing in this webinar series is about requirements engineering, because from my point of view, the requirements engineering is a more global process that is also containing the requirements management. Today, we are going to talk about requirements management, as I was mentioning, inside requirements engineering, and specifically about requirements change management. Okay, but that's the possible misunderstanding with the title. So, with all that being said, we can just move to our agenda for today. First of all, I will be introducing our company, Visure Solution, but just one slide. I will be really quick, just 1 minute, in order to locate us in the environment. After that, we will be recapping the main concept that we have learned in this webinar series, in the 6 previous webinars about requirements engineering. It's more for it's main 4 activities, and then also recapping a bit about the requirements management and the different tasks that we have seen in requirements management. Finally, we will be focusing today on the requirements management, and specifically in requirements versioning and requirements change management. After that, we will just be summarizing everything that we have seen on today's webinar, and we will have some time for question and answer. Before that, I will be also conducting a short demonstration in Visure Requirements, so you can see how those activities, how those tasks that we are going to define in the requirements management, requirements versioning, the requirement change management process can be accomplished easily with a tool like Visure Requirements. Okay, so this is going to be today's agenda. Let's start with the first topic, which is introduction the company Visure Solution. As I was saying, I will be very fast with this, very quick. Visure Solution is a company specialized in requirements engineering for both system engineering companies and software engineering companies. At the end, requirements are everywhere. If you are building a software or if you are building a system, you will need to handle with requirements. So we pick the best of both worlds, and we put that into our tool, Visure Requirement. We are in fact manufacturers and distributors of this tool, Visure Requirement, which is our leading requirement solution. But not only that, we also conduct different trainings about our tools, but also about the requirements and different good practices about the requirements, consultancy services. We also help you to certify with IREP. We are ourselves IREP certified. And our headquarters are located in San Francisco in the United States, and we have got offices in the United Kingdom, Spain, and Germany. Like I was saying, just one slide about the company. I don't want to spend more time in this. And now let's just recap for those of you that haven't been in the previous webinar, the main concept, the main lessons that we have learned in this webinar series. Well, first of all, we discussed about the requirements engineering as a whole process, and we discovered that we mentioned that the requirement engineering is mainly focusing in four activities. The word activity is really important in here. Okay, we shouldn't call them stages, because that will give us the wrong feeling that they are going to be one after each other. Okay, that there is like one sequence, and that's not the case. The four main activities in the requirements engineering are the elicitation, the analysis, the specification, and the validation of the requirements. During the elicitation, what we are going to do is just basically discover the requirement, gather the requirement of the, and this is important, of the right system to build. Okay, so basically we will be interviewing people, we will be creating prototypes, we'll be analyzing the current situation in order to just gather requirements. During the analysis activity, what we are going to do is just understand those requirements that we are gathering, and we will be also negotiating those requirements with the different stakeholders. As we have said in the previous series, not just users, stakeholders, everyone that has something to gain or to lose with the system, something to add to the system, is going to be a source of requirement, is going to be a stakeholder, and they may be a user, but they may be not. Okay. We also have the requirement specification, which is basically about, okay, we are gathering requirements, we are understanding those requirements properly, but we have also to write those requirements, okay, because they have to be read by different roles, different people, and as important as understanding those requirements is that everyone that read those requirements is going to understand the same. Okay. Finally, the last activity, but again, I don't want to create the feeling that this is a sequence. Okay, but the fourth activity, it will be the requirements validation, which is just about ensuring that the system that we are going to build is the right system. Okay, basically that is going to match with the different stakeholders, the different also users needs. As I mentioned, it's pretty important to call them activities, not to call them stages, because we are going to be moving forward and backward during the whole requirements engineering process. We will be eliciting requirement, and at the same time we will be analyzing them. Okay, maybe when we finish eliciting the requirement and we start analyzing them afterward, or at the same time we just discover that we are missing some requirements that we need to gather again, to elicit again. Or maybe we discover that we are missing requirements during the validation, so we have to go to the elicitation again, or during the specification. Basically, we are going to be jumping, as I was saying, forward and backward for during these 4 activities, and that's why we shouldn't call them stages, because there is no waterfall model for this. It's just more like I'm doing the elicitation and at the same time the analysis and specifying, and then I go back again to the analysis because I didn't get this one properly, and so on and so on. Okay, so those are the 4 main activities for the requirements engineering. Sorry. And we have dedicated a webinar for each of those activities. After reviewing these 4 activities, we have been focusing in the requirements management. We have defined here in this webinar the requirements management and those tasks that we are going to be doing in order to support the whole requirements engineering process. And we have focused, there are more things in the requirement management, but we have basically focused on 3 main tasks, which have been assigning attributes to the requirements, and that also includes prioritizing those requirements, tracing the requirements for impact analysis, for reviewing exactly why we are doing this and so on, and finally versioning those requirements, or just have some control over the changes that we are going to apply in those requirements. That is going to be today's webinar main topic, but in the previous webinar we have already discussed about the attributes and the traceability. Regarding the attributes, we have seen that they represent information that is inherent to the requirement, and it must be gathered and of course updated. It's super important to keep it updated, so we have to take that into account when we define how many attributes we are going to use. It's great to have priority, status, origin, estimated cost, estimated hours, source of this requirement, I don't know, thousands of attributes. It's impacting this customer, impacting this other customer. It's good to have that information, but take into account that the information must be updated. So we have to keep balance between how much information we want and how much time we are going to spend updating that. Okay. We have recommend assigning a responsible for each attribute, defining different access rights for them, and so on and so on. And we have also reviewed some prioritization techniques like Carl Weber's matrices, and other different techniques. And finally, we have seen a specific type of attributes, which are the workflows in which we are going to define a specific transition with a specific access rights and so on. Finally, in the last webinar, we will be discussing about one of the most important activities or task when working with the requirements, which is basically tracing those requirements. Okay. As the requirements are going to lead our whole, product or system software lifecycle, we have to somehow keep them traced with basically everything, directly or indirectly. Okay, who asked for this requirement, when this requirement was asked for, how we are going to implement the requirement, in which version of the system, what is going to be the impact if we change this requirement. For all that information, we need to keep our requirement trace, that traceability. Okay, and for that, just like with the attribute, if possible, using a tool is going to be really helpful. Okay, because tracing in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, it's good if you don't have any other thing, but it's going to be really complicated as soon as your project starts growing. Okay. And that has been the previous webinar in the series, the 6th previous webinar in the series. And today we are going to be focusing on requirements change management. Okay, I am using the change management title, but we are going to see more than this, not just change management as the process for creating changes in the requirement, but also versioning of the requirements and all the things that we are going to do to support that versioning. Okay. In order to start this, let's just review some definition about the requirements change management. The first one is just a Wikipedia definition. We just tell us that the requirement change management is a system engineering process for establishing and maintaining consistency of a product performance, functional and physical attributes with its requirement, design, and operational information through its life. Okay. It's not as clear as I would like it to be, so I'm just using a couple of extra definitions in here. The second one I prefer, it's just saying that basically the requirements change management is concerned with the different procedure, the process and standards which are used to manage changes to the requirement. Okay, basically it's all the things, all the process, all the tasks, all the procedures that we are going to apply in order to modify my requirements. Okay. Another definition, and this is coming from one of our courses, is this just basically it's a discipline that identifies a system status with discrete points in time with the purpose of controlling systematically the changes applied to the system and keep its traceability and quality over the system lifecycle. This could be a bit more complicated at the beginning, but once we start talking about different requirements version and different specification version and baselines, we will understand better what we meaning here with a discrete point in time. Okay. So it's just basically about handle or addressing the changes to the requirements, okay, the modification to the requirements. So we have to be sure that requirements may and will change during the project lifecycle. The longer the project, the more sure that we have to be about this, okay? It's as the standards group is saying in this sentence in here, changing requirements is as certain as death and taxes. Okay. In fact, in one of our courses, one of our main exercises or one of our first exercises when doing this course is just analyze the situation of a project that has been ongoing for 2 years, and we have the original specification from 2 years ago, and now we have to accept or decline the system based on that specification. Basically the idea of this exercise is to just realize that there is no way to accept or decline that system or deny that system based on a specification 2 years old without any new update to it, because the requirements have changed for sure, okay, during that time. So for that reason, requirements and the specification must be prepared for those changes, okay. So I'm saying here a lot that the requirements are going to change during the project lifecycle. The longer the project, the more changes it's going to have. But why the requirements are going to change? Why I'm so sure about those requirement changes? Well, there are several reasons for the requirements to change. The first of all, and more easy to understand, is just errors when gathering the requirements. Okay, I elicitate the requirements from this stakeholder or from this user or from this person, from this law, wherever, and I put that into my specification, and afterward I realized that I didn't get it properly, or maybe the user itself make a mistake when describing what it wanted in here. So I have got an error, and now I have to update my specification. I have to modify that. The requirements are coming from different sources. That's something that we have seen already. As they are coming from different sources, it's possible that one stakeholder want the things this way, and this other stakeholder want the things this other way, and we may have some conflicts or some inconsistencies if we try to put both into our system. So in order to fix that, we have also to modify my requirements. okay, because it's fine. I got the requirement from this source, I got this requirement for this other source, but now I put them together and I realize that there is no way for implementing those two requirements. Okay, so that's one of the main reasons for the requirements to change. Another one is when I get a better understanding of the system, let's say that the evolution of the stakeholder knowledge of the system. Okay, sometimes we realize that the stakeholder has something in mind. He start describing the system that they want. Okay, we start specifying, the specification is fine. Now we start implementing the system, and as the users start watching the result, not just the final system, okay, but as we are developing the system and the users start watching the system, he's going to realize, in fact, what the system really can do, and he's going to get a better understanding of the technology and other factors that may modify the idea that he has got in mind. Okay, now that I see that this can be done this way, I think that I prefer to get this information in this way or whatever. Okay, so we have to change the specification, change the requirement in order to support that. Changing priorities, maybe something else happened during the project life cycle. That's why I was saying that the longer the project, the more sure that we could be about the changes. And something has changed, a new priority has arisen, the priority has a shift, and we have to adapt to that new priorities. Maybe just these requirements are going to fall out of the system and these requirements are going to be incorporated, whatever. New needs may appear. If, as I was saying, if the project is long enough, we can realize that, okay, we now need to include these other requirements because they're going to be needed. The cost of the requirements or the system may modify the requirements. We start developing and we realize that this is going to be too expensive, so let's cut some features and functionalities, for example. Okay. The schedule, well, this is in fact really related with the cost. We realize that with the time that we have got, there is no way that we can implement all the features that we have been requested to implement, so we have to cut some of them. We have to modify the specification, the requirements in order to fit into this schedule. The technology, if the project is long enough, new technologies or changes in the existing technologies, that is called technology push, could arise. So I have to take that also into account. And many other reasons for changes, new laws that may arise and we have to be accomplished with them, new standards, changes in the organization and the environment, okay, the new political, the new company politics is that all the development that we are going to do in here, for a software company, for example, are going to be web-based. So if we were developing something in desktop, that's a huge change, for example. Or new competitors may arise with new features into their product, and we have to somehow include that features also in my product, or include a way, a mechanism for dealing with that. Okay. So those could be some of the reasons for the requirements to change. As I mentioned, there are much more reasons, but those could be some reasons. Sorry. Okay, so we have seen why the requirements change. When do the requirements are going to change? Well, basically, we are going to define two main points in time for the requirements to change. The first point, the first moment is going to be during the elicitation, the analysis, the documentation, or the validation. This is basically during the whole requirements definition process. As we are gathering the requirements, they will be changing a lot. As we analyze them, we realize that this is what not properly gathered. We have to modify this, or when we are validating, the user will give us no feedback. No, you haven't understand this properly. We have to do this other way, whatever. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of changes during that steps. Okay, that activities. That could be one point, one moment for changes. And a completely different moment in time is now that we have got an agreed specification, the customer has asked for this, we have signed a specification that we are going to to commit with. After that, changes will rise also. Okay, so both are changes. However, the changes in an agreed specification are going to be more formal. Once that my specification or my requirements has been, let's say, baselined, we haven't checked that concept yet, but we will eventually. Once we have that agreement, the process for changing the requirement is going to be more formal. Probably we need to create a new type of element, a new artifact called a change request that is going to be related with the with the requirements to be changed, the requirements to be removed, or the requirements to be created into the system, and so on. So it's not going to be as easy as it was before during the elicitation, for example. Okay, so basically it's just those two main points, or two different points, are going to be distinguished by the formality also of how easy it is to perform the change. Okay. As usual, we need to keep everything track. Okay, and this is really important. Who requested the change? What's the rationale for the change? How it's going to impact into my project, into other requirements, into the test that I have to run, and so on and so on. What are we going to do for supporting the change? Okay, and for that, it's really important to keep everything tracked, to keep everything trace the requirements with everything, and then analyze that trace also with the changes. Okay, we will be reviewing how we can do that using a tool, using Visure Requirements. For tracking the changes, one of the main things that we recommend to do is to have versions of the requirements. Okay, the different tools are going to come with different mechanism for dealing with this. Of course, if you are working with Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, there is no concept of requirements version beyond that you add a field into the text area saying this is a version 1, and when I change this, I'm going to put here version 2 or whatever, and just try to have that version attribute or something like that, but there is no real version. We recommend to have something like a software configuration management tool that they have been around for quite a long time, and we have been using them for keeping changes, tracking changes, for example, for my source code or for my documents, things like that. Why not? Why shouldn't we use that same features for keeping the version of my requirement? Okay, these tools allow not only several versions of the requirements, but also several users working with the same set of elements, because there is a check-in, check-out mechanism that I will be explaining afterward that will allow me that several users work with the same subset of requirement. Thanks to these versions attached to each requirement, we will have a history associated with each requirement. Just basically, I will be able to see exactly when this was modified, by whom, when it was the modification performed, why, so on and so on. So we can trace each specific version with the rationale, with things like that. Okay, we are going to see more in detail how we can keep tracking these versions in Visure Requirement in just a moment. Okay, those are things that we won't be able to do in Word or in Excel. We can keep versions of the whole document, but that's not what we meant in here. We mean version of the requirements, not of the whole specification. Okay. Also, the impact analysis is going to be super important, which is basically identifying the potential consequence of a change or estimating what needs to be modified to accomplish that change. Basically, it says, okay, I'm going to change this requirement. What are going to be the consequences in other artifacts? Which, for example, I'm going to change these user requirements. What are going to be the impact in the system requirements related with it? Or maybe in those that are not directly related. What are going to be the changes into the test? Which test I need to run again, which test I need to rewrite, things like that. Okay. As usual, traceability is going to be key in here. Okay. If I have got the user requirement trace with the system requirements, I can easily see by modifying these user requirements which system requirements are going to be or potentially impact by that change. Okay, so that is going to help me a lot. And another thing that's going to help me are the suspect relationship. I will be covering that into the demo in just a couple of minutes. Okay. I have been talking about baselines, but what exactly is a baseline? We can define the baseline like a picture or a snapshot of my whole project, or of my whole specification, or even a set of a specification in a given moment. Okay, basically it describes a moment in time in my project. It's a shared vision upon the related concern. Okay, the idea is that when certain milestones are achieved in my project, I usually create a baseline that is going to be like a frozen version of the system that I'm going to develop. Okay. For example, once I get an agreement from the user with my specification, I can say, okay, so this is what we are going to work with. Those are the requirements that we are going to be working with. So I create this baseline, and this baseline is frozen. It's non-modifiable, it's read-only, and it's safe, let's say, forever. That doesn't mean that I won't be able to add new requirement or modify the existing one, okay, but usually now it will require a more complex, a more formal process for modifying anything, okay? So I will need to create change requests and things like that. Having baselines enabled to do document comparison. Okay, I can create a baseline when I agree the specification, and maybe some months later I include a lot of changes requested by the user, by the stakeholder, and I create another version with those changes, another baseline, sorry, with those changes, and I can compare those two baselines and just check, okay, so those are the changes, this is what we have been modifying. Okay. As I mentioned, once the elements are included into a baseline, the change should follow a change control process, like we are saying here in this change management slide. Okay, we have already defined the change management for requirements. It's concerned with the procedure, process, and standards we use to manage change in the requirements. Okay. Basically, once the requirements have been baseline, changing then will require a more formal process. That will depend on the process we are adopting, depend on the company policies and any other factors, but basically we won't be able to just go to the requirements, modify the requirements and keep working. Usually we will be creating a new artifact which is going to be a change request that is going to represent the change. We are going to trace that change request probably with the requirements that may be impacted by the change. We even can create new requirements out of that change. Then we can analyze the viability of the change, the impact that the change is going to have in the whole system. There will be a workflow probably with different status in order to support that change. And once the change has been approved, we can just apply the changes to the requirements, modify the existing requirement, create new requirements, delete existing requirements, and so on and so on. Okay, so it's going to be much more formal than just go to the requirements, modify these, and save. Okay. Here you can see some of the change management policies that may cover the change request process and the information required to process each change request, just like I was saying. The process that we're going to use to analyze the impact and the cost of the change and to check if it's viable. And any other policies, is, for example, the software support for the change control process. So that's another important reason for having a software for managing my requirements. Okay, usually doing this into Word or Excel is not going to be so easy. Okay, it can be done, of course. It's better than not doing that at all. But we always recommend using Visure Requirement for things like this. And talking about Visure Requirement, what I'm going to do now is just for 10 to 15 minutes, just I'm going to switch to my virtual machine and just show you this project in here, which is the tutorial project of Visure Requirement. Okay. In this project, I have been logging in as an administrator user, so I will have rights to modify anything. What I wanted to show you in here basically is how we can just perform changes into the requirement, how we can keep track of those changes and things like that. Okay, so just figure out that we are just gathering requirements, we are modifying those requirements, we are performing some changes. As I mentioned before, we are not working over a specification that has been agreed. We are not working over a baseline set of elements. Okay, so for modifying any requirements, what I have to do first is, as I was mentioning before with the software configuration management system, is just go to the requirements I want to change. In this case, for example, I'm going to change this company logo requirement. I right click on the requirement and I can just check the requirement out. Okay, by checking out the requirement, that is going to block the requirements on this specific requirement only for me. Other users may keep working with other requirements, but they won't be able to modify this one. This requirement that is checked out by me, and I am the user working with that, I can modify it. I can just go here and say, okay, I'm going to set high priority instead of low. I'm going to change the description of this requirement. For example, it's here, just like a little Word document. I'm going to say that it's going to be 60 per 60 or 60 per 20, something like that. And I'm going to say that this is also another change. Makes sense or not, but okay, save. And once I have finished with my changes, I can just go to the requirements again and say, okay, I'm done. Just let's check this requirement in. Okay, so what's the rationale for these changes that I have applied? Okay, I have been talking with the user and he has requested whatever, I don't know. Okay, so just as simple as that, I have created, as you can see here in the history, a new version of this specific requirement with my user, which is admin, and with this rationale. At any given point, I can just go to an old version and just check exactly the details of that requirement in this version, 60 per 40 instead of 60 per 20, for example. But I can even just select two different versions and compare them in order to check exactly what I have changed. In this case, we can check that I have changed the priority from low to high. Of course, the author have been modified because admin has performed this change and the previous user was the business analyst, and the date of the modification. The description has also been modified, and I can just click on here to compare those two descriptions more in detail and check that I have added the word another change, I have changed the 4 for a 2, and so on and so on. So it's really easy in this way to see exactly what I have changed and why I have changed all these. Okay, so this is going to be a really helpful tool when performing changes over the requirements. Okay. Another important thing to take into account that I was mentioning before, it's the impact analysis of a change. Okay. I am just modifying these requirements, but let's go to the meta model of my project and see exactly how I'm working in this project. This is just what I have defined for this project. I'm going to have user requirements, which are my high-level requirement, then system requirement, which is a low-level requirement, a subset of low-level requirement, more technical requirement, and then I have got some system test. I can check in here, for example, how my user requirements are satisfied by system requirements by using a traceability matrix. This matrix is going to display in the different rows the user requirements and in the different column the system requirement, and thanks to these arrows I can check exactly how they are traced. Okay, but the important thing that I wanted to show you in here is that, as you can see, some arrows are marked in blue, some arrows are marked in red. The red arrows are what we call suspect relationship, and I mentioned that just a moment ago. What's the meaning of a suspect relationship? Well, basically, every time, once I have activated the suspect relationship control, which is usually once I create a baseline or once I have an agreed version of the specification. So once I have activated this, when I modify one requirement, automatically all the traces involved in that requirement are going to be turned into suspect. Basically, the tool is telling me, okay, you are changing these user requirements. Now you have to check that this system requirement related with it are not going to be impacted by that change. Okay, so as you can see here, I have got red arrows marking that the system requirements related with the user requirements may be impacted by the change that they have performed in the user requirement. I can afterward go manually to the different traces and just set the trace as suspect or clear the suspect for all the elements in related with a given element or just for one element and so on. I can use this feature also to simulate the change. Okay, I'm going to just check out an element, I'm going to modify the element, and then I will be here and check the impact of the change. Maybe after that I analyze and I check that the impact is going to be too big and I don't want to perform the change. So I can go back to the requirements and do the change, okay, which is possible in Visure requirement, and automatically all the traces will be, again, normal traces, okay? And this kind of analysis that I'm performing in here for checking the suspect or the impact of a change can be performed at different levels. For example, the user requirements and the system requirements, as you can see, and the system test, sorry, as you can see here, are not directly related. User requirements are related with system requirements, and system requirements are related with system test. But somehow they are indirectly related through the intermediate system requirements. So for example, if I modify a user requirement, and that is going to trigger some changes into the system requirement, probably I will need to run again the test related with that system requirement, or maybe rewrite those tests because they are no longer valid, things like that. Okay, so there is a mechanism, which is this one I'm using here, to just create a traceability matrix, an indirect traceability matrix that is going to show me how a change in a user requirement is going to affect or going to impact in the system test, which are not directly related. And as you can see here, those changes are also taken into account, or those traces are also taken into account the suspect relationship in the path. Okay, so I can check in here all those tests marked in red are basically tests that I will need to run again, or I will need to rewrite in order to support the changes. Okay. In this specific project, I haven't created any kind of change management process, but dealing with that could be as simple or as complicated as just created a new type of artifact, which is going to be a change request, okay, for example. And I can say that my change requests are going to be related with user requirements. They are going to affect. I don't have affect. I'm going to create affect or impact. Okay. And maybe I can also say that the change request can affect the system requirements. Well, I'm going to leave then the change request only with the user requirements. And if the modification comes from this way, it will affect eventually to the system requirements. So just as simple as that, I have created a new type of artifact, which are the change request. And once I have got a baseline version of the specification, I can just do this more formal process. I will need to define a workflow. For that, I recommend watching the previous webinar in which we have analyzed the different workflows and the different things that we can do with a workflow. So we can create these change requests, and this is going to be a more formal process because I won't be able to modify the change, the user requirement directly. I have to do that through the change request. Not any user will have access rights for doing that. Only when the change request has been approved, I will be able to modify the requirement, things like that. Okay. And I would like to show you also how this impact analysis that I have shown you in a traceability matrix can also be created through a let's say non-graphical way, okay, just by for example adding here a new column. Allow me to just give you a visual information column with the suspect leak indicators. For example, in this view here, as you remember, if you have watched already the traceability webinar, I'm watching the user requirement in the first level, the system requirement in the second level, and the system test, if any, in the third level. But I am creating now another column, which is the suspect leak indicators, which is basically telling me the same information that the traceability matrix with the red arrow was telling me. Okay. So I can check in here if this element is involved into a suspect relationship. Before finishing with the demo, just very quickly, I would like to show you how baselines can be also managed into Visure Requirement. Okay, when working in Visure Requirement, I'm always working with the current baseline, which is the status of the specification of the different specification right now. Okay, but if I have created baselines, I can at any given point, at any moment, just go to a previous baseline by changing this combo in here and just go in read-only mode to check the elements that was agreed and the status of the elements in this baseline. Okay. For dealing with the baselines, I have got in here in the administration part of the tool the different baselines that are in my system. I can just select an old baseline and compare that, for example, with the current status of the system. And that is going to trigger this comparison in which I can see mark in red the requirements that are in both baselines but has been modified, mark in yellow the requirements that are new or the requirements that has been deleted, mark in green, things like that. Okay, and also by double clicking into an element, I can easily check exactly what I have changed. Just like before, but now I am comparing the whole specification, not just element by element. Okay, creating the baseline is just as simple as adding a new item here, and when creating the baseline, I can create a whole baseline of the whole project, or I can create also a partial baseline just containing some requirements, not all the requirements into my project. Okay, maybe only those that are in a given status, only those that are going to be assigned to this release of the system. Okay, so I can just go to the items and just select manually or applying a filter which elements are going to be included. Okay, well, there are much more features for dealing with versions and dealing with changes into Visure requirements, but we are running out of time and I don't want to spend more time with the demo. Let's go back to the slides and just very quickly allow me to summarize what we have seen today. Okay, basically we have checked that the requirements are going to change and our specification also, and of course we must be prepared for those changes. Okay, as I mentioned, the longer the project is running, the more sure we can be about those changes happening. Okay, we have seen there are several reasons for the requirements to change, and we have also identified two main points for changes. While we are working with the requirement, let's say we are gathering them, analyzing them, which is not so formal. We are going to be modifying them any single day. And once we have an agreed specification, the requirements are going to also be modified, are going to be changed. But in this case, through a more formal process with change request and things like that. We have seen the concept of a baseline, which is basically a frozen version of the requirement, a snapshot of the project or part of the project. And we have seen how important it is to keep everything traced and track everything, because it's going to be really helpful to have that impact analysis in order to analyze if the change is going to be huge, affecting other elements, or it's just going to be an easy to do change or things like that. Okay. And well, that was today's webinar, and that also will finish the series of webinars for requirements engineering, those 7 chapters. We are going to move forward to the question and answer sections, as I mentioned before. Remember that you can use the questioning panel of the GoToWebinar interface to post your question now if you want. But before going to that, I'm going to just stop the recording because I have been recording this in order to upload this to any social media, to any YouTube channel. And I'm going to just say goodbye to those that are watching this video from YouTube, and I will be just moving forward to the question and answer section.